On October 9th, 1962, after nearly 70 years of colonial rule, Uganda gained independence from the British. Uganda became a parliamentary democracy, with Her Majesty the Queen of England as head of state. However, a series of events over the years had culminated into the Declaration of Independence. Uganda's political scene began with the establishment of the Legislative Council, or LegCo, in 1921. The LegCo consisted of the governor, the chief secretary, the attorney general, the chief medical officer, and 3 unofficial members. No African was allowed to sit on the Legislative Council. It took 37 years for Ugandans to get representation on the Legislative Council. On December 4, 1945, 3 prominent Ugandans joined the LegCo, and these included Michael Ernest Kawalya-Kaggwa, who was the Katikkiro of Buganda Kingdom, Peter Nyangabyachi, who was the Omuhikira of Bunyoro Kingdom, and Yekonia Zirabamzale, the Secretary General of Busoga Kingdom. The 1920s saw the beginning of the Bataka movement, led by clan heads in Buganda Kingdom who felt that they had been left out of the 1900 agreement. Over the years, the movement evolved, sucking in young firebrands. In the 1940s, the Bataka movement culminated into the Bataka Boo Party, whose objective was to fight against suppression of the rights of indigenous communities by the colonialists. They agitated to be allowed to process cotton and coffee, and this political awakening was driven by the likes of Semakula Mulumba, James Miti, Spartus Mukasa, Peter Sonko, and Ignatius Kangave Musazi, which lasted until 1954. In 1955, Kabaka Edward Mutesa II, who had been exiled by Andrew Cohen, the colonial governor, returned from exile. Mutesa had been exiled for pushing for Buganda's secession. His return from exile culminated into the 1955 Namirembe Agreement, which, among other issues, stipulated that Uganda would become independent after 6 years. More profoundly, though, the Namirembe Agreement transitioned Buganda from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional one under the Luchiko. In March 1961, Uganda was granted internal self-government with federal status for Buganda Kingdom. The colonial government organized direct elections in which 2 political parties contested. The Democratic Party won the elections with 43 seats, forming the first internal self-government headed by the Chief Minister, Benedicto Chiwanuka. The colonial government organized fresh elections on April 25, 1962, in which the Uganda People's Congress, or UPC party, won 37 seats. UPC made an alliance with Kabaka Yekka and formed a government headed by Dr. Apollo Milton Obote as the first Prime Minister of independent Uganda. On November 4, 1964, Uganda held its first referendum to determine whether the counties of Buyaga and Bugangaizi, which had been transferred from Bunyoro Kingdom to Buganda Kingdom in 1895 by the colonial administration, should remain in Buganda or be returned to Bunyoro. Voters in the 2 counties overwhelmingly voted to return to Bunyoro Kingdom. The result of the vote created outrage in Buganda Kingdom. When Obote presented the documents officiating the transfer of jurisdiction for Mutesa to sign as president, he refused, stating that he could never give away Buganda's land. The referendum was part of a series of events that led to the Uganda Army launching an assault on the Lubiri, forcing Ssekabaka Mutesa into exile for the second time on May 23, 1966. Earlier in the year, Obote had suspended Mutesa from his duties as president.
The Kabaka requested foreign troops in February without authority. The Kabaka organized a rebellion and these are not noticed.
with Obote declaring himself as President of the Republic through the Pigeonhole Constitution on May 1st, 1970. He made the unachievable pronouncement of the nationalization of companies.
I move the adoption of the new socialist policy proposals set out in the draft resolution contained in the document entitled the Common Man's Charter.
However, a year later, on May 1st, 1971, President Idi Amin made the Kabale pronouncement that ended Obote's hopes of turning Uganda into a socialist state. A year later, President Amin ordered the expulsion of Asians from Uganda, placing the economy into the hands of indigenous Ugandans.
As I had said when I took over, I will make sure that before I hand over the government to another government, I must reorganize this country properly, and this is a part of my program to follow.
On July 20th, 2005, Uganda held its second referendum, which changed the political system to a multi-party system of governance.
By reforming the electoral law, we removed all the old loopholes which they used to use to rig elections. Therefore, I call upon everybody to respect what the people have decided.
Today, as the country goes through another election cycle, the jury is still out on whether political parties are free to mobilize their supporters and carry out party activities without interference from the state. Gillian Nantume, NTV Tonight.